All right, if you don't mind, would you stand to your feet this morning? We're going to read out of Matthew chapter 5, and we're going to look at where we've been so far. We're in a series called The Blessed Life. On purpose, we kind of threw that word blessed upside down because what Jesus is talking about is oftentimes inverted. It's oftentimes upside down from the way we normally think about it. So here is where we've journeyed so far. That is, boy, did I not put the right slide in? That's too bad. I'm going to read to you this morning, and you're going to have to just listen because I thought I put in the right one, but that is not correct. So let me read to you verses 1 through 7, all right? 1 through 7. Pay no attention to the screen. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. All right, so now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down, and his disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. So this is the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, and here's what we've looked at so far. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. And blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And so you get to show me mercy today because I got that slide wrong, all right? So let's pray before we continue. Jesus, thank you for this time that we have to gather this morning to worship you. Oh, God, was it just great to worship you, to proclaim out to you that you are great, that you are coming back for us. God, that we are people that are full of gratitude. Lord, we are just thankful for who you are, for what you've done for us. Lord, I thank you that we get to be a part of such a great church and a group of people. Lord, we're not perfect, but we're on a journey together to know you more, Jesus, to grow in our faith, our trust in you, and to know, Lord, your love for us, your grace for us, and your mercy for us. Lord, I pray that more than anything this morning, Lord, that we wouldn't just have an intellectual understanding, but we'd have a whole body, soul, and spirit encounter with your mercy and your love this morning as we gather in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Go ahead and have a seat. The blessed life, it's upside down, it's inverted, it's different than our normal functioning. I said to you, I think the first week, more volumes have been written about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount than anything else. There are more books, more things written about the Sermon on the Mount than anything else in history. It was, shared by this, not so affluent carpenter Jewish rabbi who wasn't even an official rabbi, 2,000 years ago, and it has literally changed the world, even though it didn't probably have a ton of fanfare at the day, didn't seem to make that much of a difference, but it got into people's hearts. And as the Lord began to work this and do this in people's hearts, it began to change people. And those people, for thousands of years now, following Jesus, have changed the world as God has changed their life. And so, blessed are the merciful. This might be maybe the most popular. Maybe blessed are the poor in spirit, or the poor, or blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Might be one of the most popular of the Beatitudes that Jesus is talking about. And that word beatitude is the word for blessed. That's why we're calling it this. This is the blessed life. Jesus said this is what is blessed. And Jesus' version of blessed is this is when you know that God is standing with you, that God is with you in the midst of it. And so it is kind of strange that he's talking about things like when you're mourning and when you're poor, and then today when you show mercy. So we're going to answer some questions about mercy today, really easy for you to kind of follow along. What does merciful mean? And why is it so unnatural? Why is it inverted? Because I think most of us would say, we agree, mercy's a good thing. Like, I want mercy. I think we would say that, but when it gets down to it in our lives practically, I think there's something that sometimes we struggle with when it comes to it. Number two, what does being merciful look like? And then lastly, number three, how do we become merciful people? So we're just going to walk through that really simply. So number one, what does merciful mean, and why is it so unnatural? This may be a strange way to begin, but I grew up as a product of daytime talk shows in the 80s and 90s. Thank God they're gone. I don't know if you remember these things, the Jerry Springer show, was it the Terry Lake or Ricky Lake show, Montel Williams. There's some of you around my age, you remember some of these shows. Weren't they good, wholesome, like character developing, shows? I mean, they were amazing. If you're like younger than 25 or 30, you've really missed out. But don't worry, you have some. They're called The Real Housewives of Orange County, of New Jersey, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Oh my goodness gracious. I promise you, I've not watched 1 second of any of those shows. I have no interest. But someone was talking about The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives or something the other day, and I just was like, that's so interesting, because from what I hear about those shows, they are very much the same as what these daytime talk shows were, these reality shows now. And I'll prove it. I looked up, like, why do people watch the Real Housewives, the Secret Lives? I just stuck it in the internet. Why do people watch this? They said almost always ends in disaster, explosive friendships, dramatic confrontations. Nothing's changed. That is the same thing, right? It's about revenge plots, feuds, and, quote, cold, diabolical tirades. That is the staple of the drama of the housewives and the Mormon wives. What is it about us that are just attracted to these things, right? And in fact, this is a little less silly. I'll put myself out here a little bit. I don't mean this. You might think it for a moment that I'm trying to be like super spiritual or holy, as people may say, but I tried to watch, I'm not even going to say which one, but I started to watch about 2 minutes of one of the other celebrity roasts that had come on Netflix. My gosh. I was shocked. Here's the deal. Not only did I hear the F word more in 2 minutes than I have in my last 6 months of my life, but I find it to be interesting as a pastor who spends a lot of time with people and as a parent of 3 teenage kids that we find mocking people at any level to be funny. Because most of what I spend my time doing is helping people wrestle through the things that have been said, the things they're struggling with, the things that they're worried that people are saying about them, what's being posted on social media. And I watch that and I'm like, I almost want to vomit, not just from a spiritual thing of like, oh, this is disgusting, but from what I deal with just as a pastor in people's lives. And the comments that people make that then sit in people's minds and affect them the rest of their life. Unbelievable. We won't go any further than that, but I would highly recommend not watching any of those. But there was a moment that was like, what did they call it? The shot heard round the world with daytime talk show. And if you're around my age, you might remember this. It was on the Geraldo Rivera show. Do you remember this? He actually brought a bunch of white supremacist racists onto the show with also some black people and some black leaders, and they had an all-out brawl, as probably they should have. I don't know. But here's a picture of it. They're starting to fight each other, these guys, and they start throwing chairs across the set there. And Geraldo, it's the best picture I could find. A chair literally hit his face, or someone socked him or something and broke his nose. And I remember as a kid, I'm watching this. I was like a teenager, and I'm like, this is like absolute disaster, pandemonium. But I mean, the guests he was bringing on were ridiculous and vile. And it just, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. It says, the shocking, highly publicized brawl was dubbed the shot heard around the world by media critics, not because we were like, we've had enough and we don't want that anymore. It skyrocketed the industry. More and more shows came out. It was fueling television's industry's appetite, but let's just be honest, humans' appetite for sensationalist confrontation. Oh, man. Now, let's go back to Jesus' words. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. His comment made no sense to people 2,000 years ago. And they're not really oftentimes what we're looking for. Listen, let's just say it quick and we'll move on. But if we're honest, if stuff like that comes on television and it only fuels more viewership, we're lying to ourselves if we say, oh, we really want mercy. I mean, it's like watching a car wreck on the side of the road and you just can't look away because you want to see what happened, is what daytime talk show and I guess TV shows still are today. There's something of this weird interest that we have in people confronting each other and coming after each other. We want mercy. We say it. And we love the stories. There's great movies and there's some great stories, the best ones, not these kind of things, that our hearts long for. But there's something inside of us that gets a little twisted. So Jesus comes and he says, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Let me give you one more example of another modern day example of this. Here's another prophet. It's not Jesus. His name is John Kreese or Johnny Lawrence. They're the leaders of Cobra Kai. Okay, Karate Kid then came back as Cobra Kai. What's the motto of Cobra Kai? Remember this? Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Right? I grew up with that with Karate Kid. Some of you now younger, maybe you know a little bit of Cobra Kai, like no mercy. No mercy. Jesus didn't know how cutting edge he was when he talked. No, he did. Now, I would actually venture to say that we feel this way sometimes, but I bet we fall somewhere in between what Jesus is saying and what Cobra Kai says. I would say this, I think I have it up on the screen. This is probably how most of us feel in our life. Strike back, defend yourself, show mercy if it's shown. I would say that we probably fall somewhere near to this. Like if someone does something to you, strike back, defend yourself at least, and show mercy if it's been shown. Now here's the deal, and I'm just going to make mention of this at the beginning because we could go, this would deserve its own message and sermon as you would understand. But don't ever make an exception don't make an excuse out of an exception. And so let me just say this, that yes, we do need to defend ourselves at times. Yes, Jesus is concerned about those who inflict harm, and he is very interested in protecting the innocent and the vulnerable. Nobody would argue opposite to that. But let's not make a rule out of an exception, because by and large, in our lives, the vast majority of the time, Jesus is challenging us to be people who are merciful. There will come those small percentages where we really need to defend ourselves. But most of the time, in most of our interactions, the challenge is going to be that Jesus is going to say, I want you to respond with mercy. And our flesh is going to be like, I want to respond with Geraldo Rivera. I want to take a chair and throw it in their face. And Jesus says, no, I don't want you to do that. What did he say? Hey, if someone's forced you to go 1 mile, go with them a second. And that actually, I don't get too much time spent on that, but that's actually a cultural thing that a Roman soldier could tell somebody, especially a Jew, hey, I need you to carry something. They were allowed to force them to go 1 mile. That was the legal limit of the law for a soldier to tell somebody, I need you to carry this for me. So when Jesus says, hey, if someone makes you go 1 mile, what is he saying? If someone just went against your will and forced you to do something to the very legal limit of the law, he says, why don't you just go another mile? Why don't you just go another mile? Go beyond what they could force you to do. What is he saying? Have mercy. If someone comes and takes your tunic because they're allowed to take the one that you're wearing, he says, go home and get another one and give them that one also. What are you beginning to do? You're beginning to show them that you don't live by their rules and by their system and by the way that this world functions. That you have something behind you in your life and in your life that causes you to function differently. And so Jesus is, he's challenging us. So let me just say that. There are going to come a time in our lives, but they're the rare instances where yes, you should defend yourself, or yes, someone needs to be defended. But let's not make a rule out of some of those exceptions, because most of the time Jesus is going to challenge us to be merciful, okay? So to be merciful, just real quick, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean what the Bible is talking about, what it means? It means to have compassion, to show favor. It is to have consideration or compassion for the condition of fellow brothers and sisters. A good way to just sum it up real easily is steadfast or a generous love. I think it's really interesting, worthy of our time, but don't have time to go into it. But this whole movement of what Jesus is doing, blessed are the poor in spirit, those that are powerless. Man, when you find yourself in a place of powerlessness, you're blessed because you get to really trust in God. And blessed are you when you are mourning, right? When you're experiencing loss, when you're recognizing your own frailty, your own sinfulness, or just even the broken sinfulness and injustice of the world around you. He says, don't worry, God is with you when you're noticing those things. When you're hunger and thirsting for righteousness, man, when you see that things aren't happening in the right way, right? That things, whether it's between you and God or it's even between you and others, where they're not functioning the way that it should, the way that it is right. He's like, it's okay, God is with you. Continue to have that hunger to see things be done right. It's really interesting that he's just moving in a direction, right? So if we're people that are like, I want to have that holy discontent. I want to have that being unsatisfied when things are not right. He's like, man, now when you see those things, respond. Now, don't just have a hunger, but respond when you see those needs, when you see those places of injustice or where righteousness, where right relationship is not taking place. He's like, have compassion, show favor, do this. And this is the part I think that we kind of generally understand as people is that's what it means somewhat to be merciful. One author, commentator had the definition of this, and I really like this. To be merciful is a generous attitude, which is willing to see things from others' point of view and is not quick to take offense or gloat over others' shortcomings. A generous attitude, which is willing to see things from the other's point of view and it's not quick to take offense or gloat over others' shortcomings. Oh man, should we just sit, process that for a little bit. Someone told a friend of mine last week, they said like, hey, how'd you like church? How'd you like Mark's message? And they go, I didn't. Didn't make me feel good. I didn't like it. And I was like, yeah, I tried to warn you that Jesus is not reading off the things that we're all like, oh yes, that's right, that's what we do. If we're really hearing what Jesus is saying, he's getting into our lives, he's getting into our hearts, he's getting into our attitudes. I mean, these statements, they hit all of us, including the one who's giving them. To be merciful, what Jesus is saying, have a generous attitude, which is willing to see things from someone else's point of view and is not quick to take offense or gloat over others' shortcomings. Jesus knew this and knew we needed it before we ever had social media, before we ever had half the things that we do. He was already speaking to it because it's never changed. Social media is not the problem, right? It's just humans. We have tendencies. We have attitudes. This is in contrast, as the same commentator said, this is in contrast to society's assumption, I totally agree with this, society's assumption that it is honorable to demand revenge. We don't say it that way, but we kind of assume that revenge or just getting even, maybe that's a better word, like that's the right thing to do in certain situations. I'll come back to that. But if this is what merciful means, why is it so unnatural? I couldn't think of a better story. I might have shared this once many years ago, and I don't remember exactly when this happened, maybe between 7 and 10 years ago. But there was a young black man in the Dallas, Texas area. His name was Botham Jean, who was innocently killed by a police officer, Amber Geiger, who thought she was entering her own apartment, but she was entering his, and killed him. She used force that she shouldn't have used, but she didn't obviously mean to kill someone that was innocent. She just got herself confused. It's a bizarre story. But I'll never forget watching or seeing the news or something of the follow-up of the court. And I watched something and I just wept. Because his brother, Botham's brother, Brant Jean, was testifying at the end or maybe giving family comments. I don't remember exactly. But after Amber had taken the stand and said that she was sorry, he said this statement, if you are truly sorry, I know I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you too. And then he did something to me that shocked the world. Man, still. He asked the judge, he said, can I go and give her a hug? I have a picture of it here. I thought, man, God, what an example of mercy and forgiveness. And she ran to him. You watched it, and you're like, she needed that. Because forever as wrong as she was, you knew that in her heart it wasn't what she intended to do when she went into her apartment. And she came and embraced him, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing. Most beautiful thing. And then I was shocked. He had just received an award recently. Actually, they rewarded him, and he was like, I'll accept this reward because of my brother, but I don't deserve this. And it was all motivated. He'll talk about it. You can look it up. He was motivated by his faith in God. This is obviously what we're talking about, where we're going. But what I found to be interesting is that there was, I'm sure it wasn't gigantic, but it was enough to hear about it, that there was outrage that this young man would so easily forgive her in the light of all the different situations where people had been shot, especially people of color that had been shot unjustly, that some people just felt like that she didn't know or would anybody else deserve that so quickly, so easily. And there was a lot that was written about that, and people were a little frustrated. And I'm grateful for later on, because he just received the award not long ago, that we've kind of moved past that. But before we point fingers at all the people online that were like, that's just wrong, that's terrible, I got to be honest with you. I feel that way too sometimes about mercy. I don't think that someone deserves it. Or even at times in my life where God has asked me to be merciful, and I'm outraged that he would ask me to be merciful. Do you understand, God, the situation? It's always a good thing to ask God questions, but we need to remember he knows the answers, right? He knows the answers that we don't even know, right? But have you ever, before we look at other people, let's just be honest, I think there's a lot of that in all of us. We want great stories of mercy until they come and they touch certain parts of our life, and then we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Mercy's okay to a degree. Mercy is okay as long as this happens. And I think this story, though then it kind of sent me outraged that people would be outraged, as I think about it, I have to admit before myself, before God, I guess before you this morning, that there are times where I'm outraged because I don't want to be who Jesus wants me to be and be someone who wants to see mercy. It's nearly impossible to be people of mercy if we still have open wounds and pain. That's why we lean towards what Jesus said. You've heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? Or in other words, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? Jesus said, you've heard it said that way. That's the way that the world functions, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But Jesus said, I say to you, and this is a little bit later in the Sermon on the Mount, be a person of mercy. Be a person who goes that extra mile, who gives the extra tunic, who loves and forgives their enemies. So I just use this story to say, man, it's so beautiful, and yet it does show the other side of us, that all of us, that there's a side to us that though we want mercy, it can be really hard at times. So number two, what does being merciful look like according to Jesus? What does it look like? So I want to come back. Mercy is what we said there a moment ago, is a generous attitude. It's a generous attitude. Therefore, it is a disposition. The word actually implies an abiding. There's this abiding sense to mercy. Mercy is not circumstantial, it's not situational, and it's not impulse. And I would argue to say that Brant was not just impulsively like, you know what, I think I'm going to forgive her. I think he sat there as someone that knew that God forgave him, and that it was a response that he was to do after what Jesus had done for him, that it was what God was asking him to do, was to forgive her, to forgive others. I think this is so important. Mercy is not impulsive. It's not circumstantial or situational. I mean, it could be, but not the kind that Jesus is talking about. Jesus is saying that, listen, this is a posture of your heart towards generous love. It's just a posture of your heart. It's in its best sense, biblically, it is a posture of our hearts towards generous love. Whereas I might be inclined generally to think skeptically about somebody, to think like, I don't know if that's right or that's worthy of that situation. I should do something there. That person doesn't. Instead of having this kind of inclination away from that, Jesus is saying, listen, blessed are you when you have this posture of generous love. How can he even say that? Well, let me go a little further. Micah 6 and 8, one of my favorite verses on this in all the Bible. You probably heard this before. It says this, with what shall I come before the Lord? This is the prophet writing. What can I bring before God? How do I bow down and exalt him? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? And it kind of goes on and on. This is the normal way of worshiping. Should I come and bring my sacrifices? Should I bring my praise to God? And then it says this, he has shown you, or mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? What does he actually want? For us to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. To act justly is what we talked about just last week, to have this hunger and thirst for righteousness. Remember, righteousness and justice go hand in hand. To act rightly with others. That's what we talked about last week. What does God want of us? To have this hunger to want to act rightly with other people, and then to follow up with that and to just love mercy. To love mercy and then walk humbly before God. So it's interesting, this little phrase, to love mercy, as we've been talking about what mercy is. Do you find this to be a little interesting? To love mercy is, well, we define mercy with the word love, generous love. In other words, what God is really saying is, man, you know what I want for my people? Is for you to love generous love. For you to actually love generous love. That when we see something like someone like this young man, or in any other place in our life, and we see somebody showing mercy, and man, the situation doesn't warrant it, it doesn't deserve it, but we are to be people to go, you know what? I love generous love. And I want to get to a place in my own life where I can love generous love. To be merciful is loving, generous love. Hopefully this illustration will make sense, but kind of two ways to look at this. Like every car usually has every car I think does have has an idle function to it, where it just idles. It's just sitting there. It's not going anywhere. It's just idling. And when your car idles, it just kind of has some low RPMs, right? Like the engine's just, it's not doing very much. You're not revving it up. You're not going somewhere. And so you just have this kind of low RPMs. You could use that with cars, or you could talk about it with us as human beings, what you call like the resting heart rate, right? You go into the doctor, they'll give you test your blood pressure, and then maybe check your heart rate. And what are they looking for? Is both the same if you had a car that was at idle and its RPMs were revving really high, or if you're a human being, you're sitting there and you're resting and your heart rate is just racing, that's not good. Something's wrong with the system. Something's not right. You should have this lower resting heart rate. And it talked about, you put up this little picture here, factors that influence a resting heart rate, right? This is just basic biology health, okay, for a second. Food choices, age, hydration status, physical activity, fitness level, alcohol consumption, sleep patterns. I just found this on a medical website. Like these are the factors that affect our resting heart rate. Here's how I think a good way to illustrate this for us in our life. Blessed are the merciful. What Jesus is saying is, how's your spirit and your soul with a resting heart rate towards mercy? Towards mercy. Like where do you just rest at? Are you somebody that's like on edge? And someone pulls out in front of you, they mess up your order, your kids do something. It's always right before you have to go, and they knock over the bowl of cereal, and milk and cereal go everywhere, or the flat tire always happens on the way to. Where's your resting spiritual, if you want to put it this way? Where's your resting heart rate spiritually? Do you come back when you find peace? Because none of us are perfect at this all the time, but where do you come back to? Do you find a place of coming back to rest where your heart is in a place where you could be merciful, where you could love generous love? I think our problem in our world today is that our resting spiritual heart rate is like high strung because we're busy and we're hurrying. We have conflict in our relationships. We have wounds that have never been healed. We have addictions in our life that we're escaping to instead of dealing with reality. I think if you really start to look at it, the factors that influence what my spiritual heart rate is, I think if we really took a pulse, I think we would find that our pulse spiritually is racing. And that's why oftentimes, I think it might be more simple than what we think, maybe less spiritual in the sense of just practically spiritually, of why we have trouble showing mercy. Because we never come back to this place where we're just resting in God, where we're finding his peace and his grace and his mercy to us. Well, I'll get to that in my third point here in just a minute, but what does being merciful look like? I think it's actually being in a place where we are experiencing the mercy of God for ourselves, and it causes us to be at this low idle, if you will, this low heart rate that allows us to have a space and a place in our hearts to show mercy. I wanted to use this not as an illustration, but something I learned through a pastor and now a writer on emotional health. His name's Pete Scazzaro, and I've read a lot of his things. Our staff has gone through it. It's made a big difference in my life, and I think a lot of our staff. And one of the things that just relates to this, and I thought this might be helpful if you've never heard of this, but Pete Scazzaro says this: assumptions are like a dragon that seeks to destroy our well-being. And I think if you go back, you don't have to go back there, but the previous slide, when you're thinking about like what affects like a good heart rate, I think oftentimes when our spiritual heart rates, when our souls and our spirits are just running at all these levels, that we begin to make assumptions. We begin to make a lot of assumptions of what people are thinking and what they're doing, and it's because we're not resting. And so we're just quick to make assumptions. In fact, he says this: people quit their jobs over wrong assumptions. Churches split over wrong assumptions. Couples divorce over wrong assumptions. Families stop talking to one another over wrong assumptions. Some of it is not just my own personal idling, right? My spirit or my resting heart rate, but it's what is my own family's like idling or resting heart rate? Is it just high as a family? Is it high as a couple? And so then it begins to affect everything around you. But here's what Pete Scazzero says. I think it just relates to what we're talking about today. He calls something mind reading. He says mind reading is so dangerous. You can put up the next slide there. I think I have it here. I sure hope I do. Yeah, mind reading. He defines it this way: the destructive relational habit of assuming you know what someone else is thinking or feeling without asking them. It is considered a cognitive distortion that leads to wrong assumptions, false stories, and damaged relationships. It is considered a cognitive distortion that leads, I wanted you to hear that one more time. It is a cognitive distortion that leads to wrong assumptions, false stories, and damaged relationships. What is he saying is, in our lives, and I share this with our staff because I think about it myself all the time, is, I can't believe this situation, or that person said something, and I'm all, whoa, pause. You don't know what they were thinking. Even based upon just a text, an email, a conversation, you don't know what they're thinking until you ask them what they were thinking. You don't know. And we create assumptions that cause so much damage in our life. And I'm always talking myself down and some of our staff, my friends, it affects all of us. Well, hold on. I know that it sounded that way, and I know you felt that way, but you need to go back and not mind read and actually figure out what a situation was. You know, a lot of times we may even have it right, but when you go and ask somebody like, hey, I just felt this, and like, can you explore that a little bit more? Oftentimes someone will say, you know what, I did say that, and that wasn't right, and I'm really sorry. And it's like it all disappears. But when you just start mind reading your boss, your spouse, your kids, your friends, you start creating, I think he's really right, false stories that then you begin to build and construct things on. And I think all this comes down to why I'm sharing all this. I think this is a big reason why we don't show mercy. I think it's a big reason. Because sometimes we've already created a whole story and mindset of why someone doesn't deserve mercy. And it gets really hard when Jesus is like, hey, could you show mercy? And we're like, boom, I got 9 reasons why not. Because we've already established it, figured it out, won the argument, put them in jail. How dare you come and tell me to show them mercy? It's been done. Jesus is like, I didn't ask you to do that. I didn't ask you to do that. Let me just break this down for you a little bit more real quick. Why mind reading is destructive? He says, I'm just going to go through this real quick. It bears false witness. Lying, but bearing false witness. When you guess a person's motives without verifying facts, you often create negative storylines in your head that simply are not true. It causes us to behave negatively based on fiction rather than reality a lot of times. Hidden expectations. Mind reading usually walks hand in hand with unspoken expectations. Expecting others to fulfill needs or desires that they never agreed to creates unnecessary tension and frustration. Woo! Marriage, big time, right? Breaks trust. Acting on unverified assumptions, such as avoiding someone because you assume they're mad at you, creates an unsafe environment and stalls true intimacy. Oh, there's so much I could say. Let me read the next slide. Okay, we're going to keep going. How to stop. Adopt a never assume mindset. By the way, if you want to look this up online, Pete Scazzero mindset, you can find all kinds of great resources to go further. But adopt a never assume mindset. Commit to the fact that you do not know what another person's thinking unless they've actually specifically told you. Check your assumptions. Directly ask permission to clarify what they're thinking. Go ask them, hey, you said this. It made me feel this way, or I was wondering, did you say that because you really meant this? And ask them for clarity. It takes a little bit of guts. That's actually being merciful. It's not drawing a conclusion. It's actually going to the person. Clarify expectations. If you feel disappointed, examine whether your expectations were unconscious, unrealistic, unspoken, or unagreed upon. And speak up instead of waiting for others to read your mind. Clearly communicate your desires to theirs. All right, there's so much there, but I just wanted to kind of throw that in today because I think it's a helpful thing in our lives. And I think it prevents us from showing mercy. I'll give you an example. I'll give you 2 examples. One about me and one about a friend of mine. He was telling me the story just this week. I got permission from him, but he said, I was at the hospital a little while ago, and I saw someone standing over, and I'm going to give you the really nitty-gritty details of what he told me. He said, I saw someone stand over there, and clearly they were smoking some drugs. And he said, it's interesting, I grew up, and I was taught by my family, by my dad, just to have prejudice or even really have racist thoughts. And he said the person over there was black, and they were smoking, they're doing this, and I just had these things in my mind, making assumptions. I just moved on. I didn't think about anything about it. And then the next day, still at the hospital, the next day I come walking through the garage, and there that person is again, smoking, this time not smoking drugs, but smoking something else. And the person said, hey, can I ask you a question? And he's like, oh, okay, here we go, and got all these assumptions in his mind. And the guy asked him about a situation that he was facing. You could tell he was so nervous and so torn up inside because he was facing a very difficult situation with one of his little daughters that was just to be born or was just born. Facing an incredible situation. It was so stressful. And what was crazy, as my friend was saying, he was like, I started to realize that God put me in this person's path because he was at the hospital facing some similar things. And God was able to use him in that moment to start sharing with this person. It's just beautiful. That's not a coincidence. Not a coincidence at all. And you're there, you could be busy, have other things to do. I don't have time for this right now. Can I come back later? Or even just let your assumptions rule your mind and move on. You see, showing mercy is something that becomes the full person in our life. I'm not going to go based upon what I think or what I've been told how to think. I'm even going to stop in this moment and say what's more important right now. Maybe that God is telling me just to respond to this. And it was such a beautiful moment for them to pray together, to hug together. And what started out with simple kind of dismissing thoughts became something of, you realize that this was a God-ordained Holy Spirit moment. That's a great challenge for us all in our lives. I think this is what Jesus is saying. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the ones that love generous love instead of what they already have assessed or assumed about a situation. I've talked about my kids. Well, I talk about them quite often, but I told Nathan, I was like, I've talked about you a lot lately, and I said, I'm going to talk about you again today, but not because of you, but because of me. He recently started driving, and I know I'm not talking about him, but you got to say the context. And as it happens, he's left our windows down a couple times as rainstorms come through. I'm like, Nathan, you're not going to be able to drive my car if you can't keep the windows up, right? I come home yesterday, windows down again, rain's coming in, and he comes outside at the wrong time. And I'm like, Nathan? And I don't know how my tone was, but it was not nice. I told you, you're not driving my car if you leave the windows down. You did it again. Knock it off. You're ruining my car. And he looked at me and he's like, Dad, I didn't drive it today. Jerry did. Mom did. So I'm talking about Jerry today. No, I'm not. So I was like, okay, sorry. And I rolled up my window and I started driving. And man, God was speaking to me. So I didn't see him the rest of the day. So I came up to him and apologized this morning. And I was like, I'm really sorry that in my mind, I mind read that you did this. Like I falsely accused you. But here's the thing. My heart posture in that moment was not one to hear the story, to talk to him. It was not one of mercy. And God, dang God. Wait, we were having dinner on Wednesday night with friends from the church. And I left my sunroof open, my windows all down, and that storm came through and just drenched my car. And God, on the way to church last night after having this interaction with Jerry, is like, you are just a hypocrite. You had no mercy for your son, and you were wrong that he left the window down, and you forgot that you did it yourself. This takes us to our third point. How can we become merciful people? We can't on our own. Because mercy is not reciprocity. It is not, well, I can show mercy because you've shown it to me. If we think the world is going to function that way, it's just going to remain broken. Something has to change. Jesus tells the parable in Matthew 18. I'm just going to read this really quick, but we know it, but I thought, we got to read it before we close. It says, when Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Right? Peter's kind of thinking, he's asking a question, he's going to sound really good. Should I forgive him 7 times? Right? Because that was kind of the number of completion for the Jewish people. Like, if I forgive someone who's done something to me 7 times, am I doing pretty good, Jesus? Right? Jesus is like, no, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. What is he saying? Not at 78, you don't have to forgive your wife anymore or your husband anymore. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, no, the double completion. Like, you always forgive them. And so he goes and tells them a parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, the man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. And since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. You can go to the next one. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. 10,000 bags of gold, trying to help us relate it to how much this was. And when the servant went out and he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins, nothing compared to it, he grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and he begged him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and he had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. Right? When the other servants saw what happened, they went and were outraged, and they went and told the master everything that had happened. And the master called in the servant. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all the debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? This is a tough story in the sense that it's really negative, but it's actually, where Jesus was going to this is actually positive. He's like, there is no way that we're going to be able to function on our own and forgive debts unless we get to a place, and this is what he's saying, shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? But if you're somebody that has been shown mercy, that ought to come out of your life. And I would say that even more, what Jesus is saying, blessed are you who are merciful because you'll be shown mercy. What Jesus is saying is your ability to show mercy has come from the fact that you've understood mercy in your own life. You will be shown mercy sometime along into the future, but I think Jesus is saying more than that. He said, you'll be blessed when you show mercy because that already shows and proves, as James would say about our faith, it already proves the fact that you've been shown mercy, that you understand the mercy. On our best days, every one of us will struggle to be merciful like this servant. Our society, I'm almost done, but would you catch this morning? Our society has made disclosure over the last, 5 to 10 years a priority. Disclosure of brokenness, disclosure of sin, disclosure of things that people have done to people, and that's a good thing. I'm glad things are not hidden. But the only answer that we typically see to this is retribution, punishment, maybe revenge sometimes. But this is not enough for victims that have suffered under what people have done for them. Victims need healing, they need wholeness, and they need restoration. Mercy becomes nearly impossible for us to give if I'm still broken or wounded. It just is. Brant Jean, that young black man, this is what he said in the courtroom, or what he said when he received his award a couple years ago. After being found guilty by a jury of her peers, sentenced under the law, Miss Geiger needed to be forgiven, and I needed to be free from the burden of unforgiveness. He got it. He said after she was sentenced under the law, she needed to be forgiven, but I also needed to be free from the burden of unforgiveness. If you ask people, if you even think about yourself, to give a definition of mercy or forgiveness, typically what we say is letting somebody off the hook, letting somebody go. And there's some truth to that, but I think it's really interesting that our definition of mercy and forgiveness is often related and almost exclusively related to the trauma that we experience. Because what we're talking about is we're letting somebody go. We're not actually defining what it is, which is this generous attitude or this generous compassion for someone because of their place in need or because of what they've done. We just really see it in terms of letting somebody go. Our posture today is often created by our woundedness. Just like an animal, if it gets wounded, it gets hard to approach. If you've hurt yourself, or you've hurt your shoulder, and someone comes up to you, you have an ability to kind of pull back a little bit because you don't want to re-injure it. You don't want to get hurt. Listen, our posture today is often created by our woundedness. If my woundedness creates my posture, it will be defensive and it will be on guard. And Jesus is not suggesting that we walk around with our wounds out there to be further injured or hurt. Listen, it's quite the opposite, actually. Jesus says, listen carefully, come and be healed. Come and bring your wounds and your brokenness to me. Let me heal them so you can be people that have received mercy, that have received healing, and so you can pass on mercy, so you can pass on grace, so you can pass on healing to others. Let his healing create your posture. That's how I want us to close today. I think it would be cruel for any pastor to tell you, all right, let's go out there and be merciful. No, what we have to first do is come to Jesus and bring all of those things that would prevent you from being merciful. We all have them, myself included. What are those things in my life that have been done to me or been done to others that just have skewed my heart from a posture of mercy, where my spiritual beats per minute is way too high? And I want Jesus to come and bring healing, to bring peace, to bring grace, so that I can be merciful. You know what the truth of the matter is for some of us? We're really good at being merciful towards certain people and incidences, and we have zero in another situation. That would show you a false mercy. That's not Jesus' mercy. If I am so merciful to my family but nobody else, that's not the mercy Jesus is talking about. If I'm merciful to everyone outside of my family and I have no mercy for my family, that's not the mercy that Jesus is talking about. Those are, I have a connection with someone with what they've gone through, and I expect people to be merciful to them, but I have mercy over here because those are the people that have either done that in my own life. It's my woundedness that's speaking in those moments, not mercy. Jesus wants to get to a place where we love generous love for everyone because he's healed me, he's fixed me, he's shown me his grace, and he's shown me his mercy. Mercy is not reciprocal, but listen to this. Mercy can become an overflow out of your life if you've known the love and the mercy and the grace of God. Would you stand to your feet this morning? We're almost done, but I want you to interact with the Lord as we close. I'm so glad you decided to join us for our service today. I really hope that you heard from the Lord, you were encouraged by him, you were just touched in some way knowing that God loves you and cares about you. Hey, if you would like more information about our church or just would like us to be able to connect with you, to pray with you, you can go to our online connect card at both our website or on our app, either way, and just fill that out and we'd love to connect with you. All right, God bless you.